There is a wrought iron gate 5 minutes from downtown where the city's lights blur into a low hum, and beyond it, the air seems to hold its breath. At dusk, the oaks lean like sentinels, and the path underfoot changes tone. Gravel becomes a measured percussion. This is where we begin. These are the 8 most dangerous places in Georgia no one dares to visit. Dangerous not only for the real risks they pose, flooded depths, crumbling stone, narrow roads, but also because they are places that remember. They keep the past close, and sometimes that past presses back. If you enjoy local legends and eerie history, tap like and stay with the list. There's restraint here. History first, report second, respect always. 1. Oakland Cemetery, Atlanta. Established in 1850, Oakland Cemetery rests less than 2 miles from Atlanta's modern skyline. It began as a garden cemetery and grew through war and prosperity. Civil War soldiers lie in orderly sections, and monuments chart the city's rise and sorrow. From a distance it looks like a city park. Up close it reads like a ledger of lives. At dusk the place shifts. Long shadows stretch between marble and granite. Spanish moss moves without wind. The sun slides down, and the stones take on a muted glow. You can hear flags snapping on their poles in a way that echoes like a soft percussion. People who walk the paved lanes at twilight speak of odd second footsteps, something following the rhythm of their own, then falling away. Visitors describe a lightness on the skin, a brief coolness that arrives even on warm nights, and once in a while the impression of a chant or a roll call drifting through the trees, as if soldiers were rehearsing names. These are the reports locals pass along, a presence felt more than seen. There is a quiet tension here, an awareness that this is ground set aside for remembering, not for spectacle. Many who come for the architecture and history say the place becomes heavier at night, as if the stones draw in the city's noise and leave only the echoes. Respect is the first rule. Oakland is a public cemetery and a cultural landmark. Stay on public paths, visit during official hours, and treat markers and graves with care. Do not use headstones as props for a thrill. That boundary is part reverence, part safety, uneven ground and low-light hide trip hazards. From the city's memorial quiet to a bridge lost to the woods, the list turns from cultivated remembrance to a place the forest seems to have swallowed. 2. Spook Bridge, near Valdosta. Spook Bridge sits off a narrow road where trees crowd in and the canopy swallows daylight faster than the open fields. The deck itself is a squat slab of concrete hanging over dark water, and the approach is framed by years of undergrowth. The bridge's silhouette is simple, the stories around it are not. Locals tell of a woman who vanished near the crossing. Depending on who tells it, she was fleeing, or waiting, or simply lost. Over the decades, the tale has acquired details like barnacles. Drivers arriving after dusk report a sudden drop in temperature the moment they step from road to bridge. Some claim to see a pale figure on the far bank, a shape that dissolves when headlights sweep across the water. Others report lights that drift along the surface and then wink out. There are also quieter accounts, the feeling of being watched, of a hush falling so complete that insects and wind seem to stop. The practical danger is immediate. The road is narrow, it is easy to be boxed in by another car. The railings are low and the surface can be slick. People who linger on the span at night risk exposure, not just to folklore, but to real hazards, passing vehicles, poor footing, and limited visibility. Do not block the roadway. Do not venture there alone after dark. Treat the bridge as a place of local memory, and if you must visit during daylight, keep to the shoulders and respect private property signs. The woods do not forgive carelessness. As trees close in, Savannah's old burial grounds open into a vastly different kind of stillness. 3. Colonial Park Cemetery, Savannah. Founded in the 18th century and already collecting victims of yellow fever and early settlers, Colonial Park Cemetery is a place where history sits close to modern life. Tucked behind the bustle of Savannah's squares, it bears stones that tilt and settle into soft earth, a record of generations and epidemics. During the day, tourists thread the paths between leaning markers, and the city's lights flicker beyond the iron fence. At night, the cemetery becomes another place entirely. Visitors tell of whispers that rise between the stones and fade as you turn, voices without visible speakers. Some describe a pressure against the chest, a heaviness that pins the breath momentarily. Others mention flashes, a lamp swinging in an empty aisle, or a pale movement between graves that the eye won't hold. The most common reports are of auditory phenomena, footsteps on gravel when no one else is present, the muffled scrape of a shoe that stops as if someone vanishes into the earth. This is a burial ground first. That fact should shape how anyone approaches it. Stay within public visiting hours. Walk on paths, do not disturb markers, and remember that the people buried here were once neighbors. There is a temptation to hunt for a chill, but Colonial Park's history demands reverence. Treat it as you would any resting place. Trespassing after dark is both illegal and disrespectful. From the city's small cemeteries, we head to a house whose walls have seen both guests and suffering. 4. Kennesaw House, Marietta. The Kennesaw House began as a grand hotel in the 19th century, and during the Civil War served as a hospital like many civilian buildings pressed into service. Its stairwells and corridors have been walked by travelers, patients, nurses, and soldiers. The building carries the accumulated weight of those movements. Step inside, and the atmosphere tightens. Wood floors remember the scuff of boots. Old photographs show rooms once filled with beds and makeshift wards. Guides and guests tell of a certain residual smell, of old medicinal herbs and the mineral tang of iron that seems to linger in corners. Visitors in modern times report elevators behaving as if someone else is boarding. Doors pause, lights flicker, and the elevator settles between floors. Others speak of the sensation of being watched in places where no one stands. At times, footsteps echo down hallways when the building is otherwise still. The emotional weight of the Kennesaw House can be heavy. It is not simply a curious haunt. It is a place where care and suffering intersected. For those visiting today, official tours and public access points exist for a reason. Respect the building's history and the boundaries set by caretakers. Do not attempt to access closed rooms or wander the property after hours. Memory can be almost as dangerous as decay. Unregulated exploration risks both legal trouble and real harm from hidden hazards in older structures. If a hotel-turned-hospital holds memory within its walls, then a nearby reservoir holds it in its depth. 5. Lake Lanier, North Georgia. Lake Lanier is a startling expanse of water carved out by human hands. It covers valleys where foundations, roads, and tree lines lie submerged beneath the surface. Since its creation, the reservoir has been the scene of many accidents, and for some it holds stories that refuse to settle. Out on the water at dusk, the lake looks like polished glass stretching to a dark horizon. Piers jut into emptiness. Boaters sometimes speak of lights that appear offshore, single points that bob and then vanish without trace. Swimmers and anglers report an odd pressure below the waterline, an undercurrent that feels like a hand moving through the legs. There are accounts of voices carried up from the dark, indistinct and far away, or the eerie sensation of something vast and unseen shifting deep below. These are the kinds of reports that sit between memory and hazard. The reality is concrete. Lake Lanier has a history of drownings and dangerous underwater structures. Currents and submerged obstacles are real threats. Do not treat folklore as a reason to disregard safety. Swim only in designated areas, wear life jackets when boating, and heed official warnings. Never go out alone at night on the water. The lake's mysteries can be compelling, but the risk to life is immediate and measurable. Respect the water. From the black water, we move inland to a place of stone and garden where ivy and ruin have a different kind of danger. 6. Barnsley Gardens, Adairsville. Barnsley Gardens sits among the ruins of a once grand estate, where arches hold up only themselves and pathways thread through ivy-clad stone. The place was meant for leisure and hospitality, and yet fell into an elegy of architecture, a garden of half-remembered summer afternoons. As daylight wanes, the ruins change color. Sunlight finds arches and then slips away, leaving pockets of shade that gather sound. People who wander the grounds at twilight say they see figures threading through broken archways, silhouettes that seem pulled from a bygone ball. The most common claims here are of soft voices at the edge of hearing and of the sense of being watched from a corridor that leads nowhere. The feeling is more melancholy than menacing, an ache for what was rather than a threat. Yet the physical risks are unmistakable: loose stone, hidden drop-offs, and slippery surfaces where ivy hides the ground. Barnsley invites aesthetic wonder, but the ruins demand caution. Visit during daylight hours, stick to maintained paths, and avoid climbing on structures. The danger here is structural as much as atmospheric. Curiosity should be tempered by care. A misplaced step among aged masonry can end a story before it begins. Preserve the site for others. Don't turn ruin into reckless exploration. From ivy and stone, we return to Savannah for a house that holds private tragedies and public whispers. 7. Sorrelweed House, Savannah. The Sorrelweed House is a study in contrasts, Greek Revival elegance paired with stories that have hardened into local legend. Dating to the 1840s, its facades and formal rooms speak of a certain southern grace. But the history that folded into those rooms left marks that some say still linger. Visitors often describe a chill landing at certain points in the house. The landing of the staircase, the hallway outside a bedroom, where the air suddenly loses its warmth. Guides repeat stories tied to Matilda Sorrel, whose name appears in local tales as a figure connected to sorrow within those walls. Accounts vary, as local histories often do, but the common notes are consistent. Sudden cold spots, an inexplicable sourness in the air, and occasional low sobbing that arrives and dissipates. Some touring guests report chairs scraping as though someone has risen. Others feel a pressure, like breath against the back of the neck. The house is a historic property, and that status carries responsibility. It is also a private place of memory and should not be treated as a stage for bravado. Visit during sanctioned tours, observe the rules, and remember the people who lived and suffered there were real. Do not attempt to enter off hours or disturb the rooms. Respect for the house and its past is both an ethical duty and a safeguard against harm. Finally, the list draws to a coastline, the steady watch of a lighthouse and an island that keeps its own counsel at night. 8. Tybee Island Lighthouse and After Dark Island. Tybee Island. For more than a century, the Tybee Island Lighthouse has stood as a sentry. Its beam crosses shoals in sudden weather, and the coastline holds the memory of shipwrecks and those who watched over the sea. The lighthouse is part history, part practical tool, its stones seasoned by salt and wind. Climb the spiral and you notice the stairs remembering every footstep. On moonless nights, the island has a hush that feels like the ocean listening. Visitors who have lingered near the lighthouse after sunset report shadow crossings, figures that vanish between dunes, and the impression of footsteps behind them on the wooden stair treads that, when turned to, belong to no one. There are also quieter reports, the beam seeming to pause as if waiting, the low murmur of voices carried and lost in the wind. Guides sometimes mention the lore of a keeper who never left his post. Local tales attach names and small tragedies to the shoreline. These accounts come as part of the island's long story. Coastal danger is immediate and uncompromising. Strong tides, rip currents, and rapidly changing weather are real hazards. After hours, the dunes are unstable and vegetation can hide sudden drops. Stay off restricted structures, heed posted closures, and avoid swimming alone at night. If you wish to experience the lighthouse's history, do so within the boundaries the keepers set. The sea has no patience for trespass. These 8 places share a common thread. Each holds memory in a way that affects the living. Sometimes that memory is carried in gusts of wind and the creak of a stair. Sometimes it lives in the water and the way it reflects a single light that disappears. The danger these locations present is twofold. On one side, there is clear physical risk: deep water, crumbling masonry, narrow roads, and the hazards of poor light. That danger demands practical caution and respect for rules and closures. On the other side, there is the emotional and ethical risk of treating real tragedy as entertainment, turning graves, hospitals, and house tragedies into a spectacle for a thrill. If you are drawn to these places, do so thoughtfully. Visit during daylight when allowed. Use official tours. Keep to the paths. Don't block roads or harass sites that are also private property. And remember, the stories people tell about footsteps, cold spots, and lights are testimonies, important, strange, and worth listening to. But they are not proof, and they are not a reason to break the law. There are more corners of Georgia where memory lingers, honorable mentions that didn't make the main 8, each with its own local stories. If you want a quick list of those as a bonus, say so in the comments. If this journey through Georgia's unsettling corners spoke to you, subscribe for more deep dives into America's creepiest places. Share any local stories you've heard in the comments, responsibly and respectfully, and let us know if you'd like a separate video on those honorable mentions. Above all, whether you seek history, atmosphere, or a quiet place to think, do it with care. The past deserves remembrance, not exploitation.